What's up, guys? It is Ethan Bishop, president of the WSU Dems, and today we are going to be talking about the looming government shutdown, Trump deploying federal troops to Portland, and many other things. So how about you guys introduce yourself, and yeah.
I'm Stella Hoyle. I've been here a couple times in the past, but I'm excited to be here again.
I'm Vaughn. I was here last time.
So basically, like I said, we're going to be talking about the government shutdown looming at midnight. Congress still hasn't passed a funding bill. Republicans are pushing for a clean short-term extension, so a bill with no extra content in it. While Democrats want to include healthcare measures like ACA subsidies and Medicaid funding, Republicans just took away with their big, beautiful bill. With both sides refusing to budge, a shutdown looks likely, which would mean federal workers furloughed, government services disrupted, delays in paychecks and benefits, and ripple effects across the economy. Now, this might not be in effect if Chuck Schumer does roll over for the Republicans and lets them pass this bill without the inclusion of these healthcare parts of it. There's some reporting that he is going to be willing to do that. He's rolled over in the past for these government funding bills, and that's one of the reasons why people are saying he needs to be primaried. He just needs to not be the leader of the Democratic Party in the Senate anymore. But I was just kind of curious about, we could have a discussion here about, for must-pass legislation, whether it's to fund the government or, for example, during Biden's term, how they wanted to pass the American Rescue Plan, which was the COVID stimulus bill and that sort of thing, where it's must-pass legislation, just like the government funding. So should we try to fight for concessions before agreeing to, for example, fund the government or to do this must-pass legislation? Should we hold up bills unless we get what we want, or should we just look at it and say, oh, no, the government needs to be funded. It's not worth it to fight and to try to get things done, if that makes sense. So I'm curious what you guys might think about that.
I personally think that, kind of putting on a pause with the government, as long as the shutdown doesn't last more than a couple days as it has in the past, I think that's a good thing as long as we're, still fighting for people's access to, healthcare or anything kind of vital. But if it's, a shutdown based off of how should we, fund this specific part of like NASA, I don't see a point to pausing that because it's not really worth fighting for, because we can always just do more research later when it comes to space.
Yeah, so certain things, you would want to keep the government open for, but then certain things, if it's on the table and you could actually stop them from, for example, taking away reproductive rights or health care or whatever, then it's justified to make the government shut down. Otherwise, it might not be worth it. I agree with that. So I wouldn't say that like every single time I need all of my, laundry list of priorities in this bill. It's just there's certain things that should be common sense. So I completely agree with that.
So you're saying that that it's best in some cases, you think, to avoid the shutdown rather than fight for what you want on the bill?
It depends on what you want. Like
Yeah.
you said, if it was like funding of NASA, for example, and you say, oh, well, I don't like how this funding is being allocated, so I'm not going to vote to fund the government unless they do away with that. It's like, I don't think that that's justified, but if it was, for example, like how they just took away all the, they like $800 billion from Medicaid and that sort of thing, I think that's totally justified to say, hey, you just took that in order to fund the government. You need to give that back, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that it might be best to avoid a shutdown in some cases and not get what you want, but I think with this administration, it's very important not to give in, and we see that with silencing the media with Jimmy Kimmel. He came right back and just still fired at Trump. All the other late night shows have, not toned it down at all. I think that's really important. And for the Democrats, maybe we get into a shutdown, but I think it's important not to just let the GOP steamroll us and just let them, do whatever they want.
Yeah, exactly. We need to be using every lever of power possible and just wanting to keep the government open. I mean, and even like politically, I mean, the Democrats, they have the government shut down. Yes, that could mean paychecks are could be threatened. Like I said, workers furloughed, government services disrupted. That could even disrupt services for veterans and that sort of thing like that. I still just think that Democrats, they need to fight dirty, and they need to know that this isn't business as usual, and this isn't an administration that I think you should kowtow to. As you said, it is very important not to give in, and anything you can do to rein in anything that they're doing, I think, is a good thing to try.
Just one thing is the media, like, it's so everyone can put their own spin on things, and I have Truth Social to follow a lot of the what the right is saying, just to get a good balance. And just the way they phrase things, like, it's not necessarily either party's fault, I guess you could say, that the shutdown is coming. Both are trying to get what they want out of it. And just this headline I saw, it says, Trump warns of government layoffs as Democrats refuse to reach deal to avoid shutdown. So it just, like, it blames them. They're the reason that this shutdown is going to happen, and they don't want to make a deal. And it's just, that kind of pissed me off. And then I had no idea the last government shutdown was 7 years ago. It lasted 35 days, and it cost the economy at least $11 billion, which seems, I don't know how that adds up, but kind of scary stuff looking into it. How much money it could really cost. And then one of the other things I was looking at, I was asking the question, do other major countries also deal with government shutdowns? And you'll find that the answer is no. It's a problem that's very specific to the U.S. and how our government functions. And it's pretty straightforward of how these other governments deal with it. So, for example, Canada, they continue operations. They don't put anyone on furlough, and they just continue with everything and still try and get that budget passed. Germany will go through with their existing budget, just carry on with that until they get the new one passed. And the UK, again, they keep working until the budget's passed. So it seems like we should kind of adopt a system like that, where if we don't agree with each other, everything shuts down and, it goes into this panic. I think there's definitely a better way to go about it.
Yeah. I didn't even think about how other countries would do that, so thank you for adding that. That's very informative, and I like how you said at the beginning how the media frames it as the Democrats refuse to reach a deal, when it's like, yeah, and the Americans who unfortunately just read the headline, they might see that and be like, oh, the Democrats are bad. But I think once they actually read the bill and see the Democrats aren't wanting to come to an agreement unless they can undo the fucking bad shit with the cutting Medicaid and to keep the enhanced Obamacare subsidies in place, I feel like they might blame them at first, but once they see that, they're like, yeah, that's kind of important. Healthcare is the top issue. It's our lives, basically, and our livelihoods for, the medical debt and that kind of thing. So I am curious. I do think that some polling did actually show, though, with Trump and the Republicans, since they are still in power, they still would probably get the brunt of the blame if the government shutdown actually did happen. And Republicans, I think, were blamed in the past because the last one was under Obama, right? And
it was 2018.
Oh, so, yeah. Oh, that was, I didn't know that happened that recently.
Or no, that would have been Trump.
That'd be Trump, yeah. I didn't even know that happened that recently. Mm-hmm. Because I knew with Obama, they were always wanting to shut down the government and not wanting to come to agreement with him over dumb shit. Whereas here, I feel like the Democrats are justified in what they're not wanting to support.
Yeah.
Next, I want to talk about how Trump's deploying federal troops to Portland. So President Trump has ordered the deployment of 200 National Guard troops to Portland, Oregon under Title X authority, allowing them to perform federal functions for up to 60 days. This move is aimed at protecting U.S. immigration, customs enforcement, ICE facilities amid ongoing protests. Oregon's Governor Tina Kotek and Portland Mayor Keith Wilson have strongly opposed the deployment, filing a federal lawsuit arguing that the move is unconstitutional and an overreach of federal authority. They assert that Portland is not experiencing the level of unrest described by the president. The announcement has sparked protests in Portland, with demonstrators expressing concerns over federal intervention in local matters. A U.S. district judge has scheduled a hearing to consider a temporary restraining order against the deployment as the legal battle continues. So, kind of what I think about this is, literally, I saw the video of Trump talking about how he got called from Tina Kotek, and she was saying that it wasn't as bad. And he's like, oh, well, it's what I'm seeing on TV, not what's actually happening. It's like, so yeah, you're literally watching Fox News, you're watching propaganda. And a lot of the time with these videos of Portland that they're sharing to justify this is videos from 2020, where it was much, much bigger protests in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder and all that. And they're just mixing it in to make it seem like it's worse, and kind of almost indoctrinating Trump because he's dumb enough to just see something on TV and be like, oh, well, there's a huge problem. Like if Fox News said that there was like the Death Star approaching, they'd be like, oh, we got to go, shoot the Death Star. Like I could totally see him doing that, just because he's dumb and he just thinks like that. And speaking of Star Wars, I think that's also why he's deploying these troops, like how he did to California, like he threatened to do with Chicago, as he posted that picture where it said like, yeah, Chicago's about to know why it's called the Department of War and that kind of thing. So he just wants to be like a strong man, and that's kind of what he's doing here. He thinks that it makes him strong to send troops into cities where they're not needed. So yeah, what do you guys think about that?
I think it's absolutely federal overreach, and it's not so blatant to say that sending troops is a terrible idea, and because there is a problem in Portland and these cities that he reports these crazy numbers that those are not true, but the fact is that there are problems in these cities. Like I'm from Salem, I don't really like Portland. Every time I go up there, it's just like tweakers everywhere and just so much homeless, so much crime. My aunt lives up there, and she, I hear like every week there was a shooting outside her house, and she found some guy OD'd on the sidewalk, and like there definitely is a problem there. But I don't think sending masked agents who just inherently break the law. I've seen so many videos on Reels of these masked guys who just they tackle people who will say something wrong. I saw one guy where a guy's criticizing the agents standing in a group on the sidewalk, and they start running after him to tackle him, and he actually escaped on his bike, and everyone's cheering.
I saw that.
But I just saw one today where an ICE agent like body slammed a reporter, and it's just California passed a law that they can't wear masks, but that's the only state I've seen. Other than that, they just do that to project their identity. But yeah, it's absolutely federal overreach. I don't think it's right.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just kind of a scare tactic, kind of along the lines of just fascism in general, just throwing, I don't know, military and just overall power and weapons just at anything, trying to impose control is what it looks like. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, sending extra ICE agents anywhere I think is dumb because there's already too many in my opinion. Like just here on campus, I've seen a handful, especially like at campus housing. I've seen a couple here and there.
Oh, wow.
And I have no clue why they're there or how they got there because to my understanding, that's against housing's contract to let, I don't know, federal agents in without letting people know. But I don't know, what do I know? So it's complete, as you said, overreach, and I think it's a scare tactic, and I think just everyone should be kind of fighting back as they are. Reporters mocking and just people mocking, I think it's completely justified because, I don't know, to fight fascism, you got to kind of play dirty.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely just him trying to assert himself as the boss, pretty much. He has such a huge ego, and a fragile ego for that matter, that he just thinks he has to do a whole tour of all these blue cities. And like you said, yeah, there's issues with that. I mean, like I was kind of complaining a little bit because when I went to California in 2022, we went to, I think it's called the Tenderloin, because we were going to go meet like this political slash animal activist commentator, and that he lived down there. And there was so many homeless people. That's not to say that being homeless is bad, or that a homeless person is necessarily dangerous, but when it's like a huge horde of homeless people, this might give me trouble. It kind of looks like on The Walking Dead, how there's like all the zombies just kind of like that. And there's just so many needles on the ground. It's like literally a sea of needles, and it's all this stuff. It's like there needs to be some kind of that needs to be cleaned up, basically, not in an inhumane or like violent way or whatever, like Trump would probably have done, but more so just we need more mental health resources and just people on the ground to support these people who are going through addiction and who actually need to get help. I think we just need to go help these people instead of just moving them around like they do in California and these other places. Just a bunch of homeless people here. Okay, move them this place because we're having this convention or this important thing. Oh, they all come back, bring them over here, drop them off in a different city so they have to deal with it. So yeah, there's some serious work that needs to be done there. School shootings. I don't know if this number is accurate, come to think of it, but this year, there have been at least 11 school shootings resulting in injuries or deaths, with 42 individuals affected. Notably, a 16-year-old student opened fire at Evergreen High School in Colorado, wounding 2 peers before fatally shooting himself. And then there's also was the church attack in Michigan. So former U.S. Marine Thomas Jacob Sanford attacked a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Grand Blanc Township, Michigan. He rammed his vehicle into the church, opened fire with a semi-automatic rifle, and set the building on fire using gasoline, resulting in 4 fatalities and 8 injuries. So I'm kind of curious if we could kind of have a discussion about public safety and that kind of thing. Like, what can we do to prevent this? I know last time we talked about whether a teacher should be able to have guns in schools and that sort of thing, and we kind of agreed that sometimes that would be more harm than good. That being said, I don't think there's as much of an issue like if it's an actual armed security guard, which I think most schools do have anyway, which that doesn't always help. Like in the Parkland shooting, there was, I believe there was multiple armed security guards that just didn't go and they didn't stop the shooter, just like how in Uvalde, the cops literally just stood outside the school while a bunch of kids were just getting massacred in there. You know, and I used to think as an edgy, like a little, like several years ago, I used to think there should just be like a turret like set up in the room and then it can detect if someone's shooting and then it just shoots them. Which, I mean, you might think, yeah, but what if that malfunctioned or something? Like, that would be crazy. So, I don't know. What can we kind of do in response to this? Or, you know, with school shootings as well as the church attack in Michigan, what can we do to try to undo this? I would say we should try to treat guns a little bit more like cars, where you need, you know, mandatory training, you need to pass a written test, you need to know how to drive, and you need to get your license renewed and that sort of thing. So that's just one thing that I think, without banning guns, like a simple thing you could put in place. But I'm curious what you guys think.
One thing I think, besides, you know, policy, because that takes a lot of time and arguably a lot of fighting between the political parties to actually get done, it's just changing our rhetoric about it. Because, you know, with all these like recent shootings that have been happening, you know, people have been like, oh, it's this political party, it's this group, you know. It's just immediately, you know, kind of a pointing fingers and blaming, instead of what we should be doing, which is just immediately just being like, oh, this was horrible, you know, this shouldn't have happened, and leaving it at that instead of trying to be like, it was, trying to blame stuff. You know, if we can kind of shift the rhetoric from kind of over hyping it with like anger, instead kind of just focus more on just human empathy and just be like, you know what, this is bad, you know, we should be fixing this, instead of like glorifying it as this awful thing, you know, that is done by this specific group, this organization. It should be more of this is a horrible thing, we need to fix it.
Exactly.
Just leave it at that.
And like with the Charlie Kirk murder, for example, you could look at what the Utah GOP, their official account posted, and they were like, this kind of leftist, vileness or whatever they said is allowed to fester on like college campuses and the internet. And so they were basically saying it was a leftist that did it before they even knew anything about it, about the shooter or anything. And now it's looking like they were more like a groyper or some just deep into the internet, like Nick Fuentes, almost follower. It said they did have a trans partner, but how with Ben Shapiro events, there's all these Grindr outages because all the conservatives are secretly on Grindr and all that. So it could be a situation like that, because Governor Cox was just up there talking about how he has a trans roommate, as if that seals the deal that they did it for transgenderism. Although, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Too much finger pointing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially with the GOP, they try so hard to blame it on anyone but them. And again, it's another white guy. That's just, history repeats itself. It's not a black person. It's not a transgender shooter. It's just another white dude who, sometimes is Christian and Republican, and they just keep trying to point fingers, but they just keep getting proven wrong by the people who do this. But I think it boils down to mental health. Ultimately, the guy who did this to the Mormon Church, he was a Iraq war veteran. So maybe some mental issues there, and it should come down to how can we, and keep this from happening and actually take steps instead of thoughts and prayers and move on.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and honestly, I think it's hard because I want to say there should be more police or more security and that sort of thing, but sometimes that doesn't always play out well. Like, for example, I won't say this because that docks completely where I work, but if there are police nearby and that sort of thing, I don't necessarily feel safer because a lot of the shooters, they intend to get shot or they intend to shoot themselves, so there being cops around or coming, like, wouldn't necessarily, thwart that. So that's kind of the only other thing where I think maybe we should have armed security just like in the places as well. If it got bad enough, I think we probably should. Better safe than sorry, but.
Yeah, there was a few years ago, I remember there was a shooting, I believe it was in a Texas church, and this guy got up and pulled out his gun and was about to shoot up the place, but there were so many other gun owners there that they actually shot and killed him before I think he killed anyone. So in some cases, the Republicans will argue that more guns makes people safer, but I think that's a rare case.
Yeah, I agree. Because even when you look at these studies about, like, how if someone has a gun in their house, like, they're more likely to kill themselves with it than a potential burglar or whatever, just on accident or from suicide. So, I mean, that's something important to note. I'm definitely not like 1,000% anti-gun, but I'm also not someone who glorifies it. So,
I just want to add to about how to keep people safer in schools and other environments like that. It's kind of a fine line with how the rules that you give the security guards. Do they have a weapon or not, and what are they allowed to do and not do? So, for example, in high school, I was already graduated, but I heard this kid that I know, he was involved with some shady guys, and a rumor spread around. It wasn't actually true, but rumor spread around that this kid did some stuff with another guy's girlfriend. So this guy got all his homies together, and they said, we're going to jump you after school. And the kid knew about it, so he went up to the school and said, they're going to jump me after school. So they sent him a security guard to walk him to his car, and they were walking to the parking lot to the car, and the guys were there, and they jumped him anyway, and the security guard stood there and did nothing because he's not allowed to touch the kids. He's not allowed to put his hands on them or, so he walked him to his car, and then he got jumped anyway, so it was just completely useless. So but it's also hard, you give them too much power, and then that's another issue. So it's a hard balance.
Because it's like at that, this was like a few months ago, where they had, like, it was the 501, like, Ogden, or the 501 protest or whatever in Salt Lake. And there was this guy who had an automatic weapon, and he was just walking with it. And then one of the security guards just got the gun out, and they like shot at him. And there's a video of it and everything. And then eventually the person who had the automatic weapon, he got let go from jail because they realized he didn't even shoot or do anything with it. So yeah, that's a good point what the security does. But it's hard because it's hard for me to feel bad for the person who had an automatic gun like that, because why would you just be open carrying like that in a public event with a bunch of people there? Part of me doesn't even blame the security guard. They were just trying to protect everyone else. For all they knew, they were about to start open firing. So when people are like, oh, well, it's legal to carry that gun and that sort of thing, it's like, yeah, but it still looks super sketchy. In significant development, former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted on charges of making false statements and obstructing Congress. These charges stem from his 2020 testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee regarding the FBI's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. The indictment was issued by a federal grand jury in Alexandria, Virginia, just days after President Donald Trump publicly urged the Department of Justice to act now to prosecute Comey and other political adversaries. Critics argue that this move reflects a broader pattern of using the Justice Department as a tool for political retribution, raising serious concerns about the independence of federal institutions. So, yeah, we have, and President Trump has indicated that more figures, including former FBI Director Christopher Wray, New York Attorney General Letitia James, Senator Adam Schiff, could face similar scrutiny. This has led to bipartisan alarm, with legal experts warning that such actions blur the line between justice and political vengeance, potentially undermining the integrity of the Department of Justice. And I will actually say this because since he got indicted on charges of making false statements related to Donald Trump and his 26 campaign colluding with Russia, basically, I wanted to kind of say what I found on that. So, contacts with Russia. Multiple members of Trump's 2016 campaign were found to have contacts with Russian officials or intermediaries. This includes attempts to get helpful information about Hillary Clinton or to set up meetings. Some people close to Trump ended up charged or convicted for lying to federal investigators, financial crimes, or obstruction related to the investigation, including Michael Flynn, Paul Manafort, and Roger Stone. These convictions were often about obstruction, lying, and financial crimes. Then James Comey, he led the FBI direction into Russian interference and potential campaign connections. Trump fired Comey in 2017, citing dissatisfaction with the Russia investigation, among other stated reasons. Comey's firing sparked the appointment of special counsel Robert Mueller, and then that all played out. So basically, James Comey is the first of many, I think, who are going to be indicted by Donald Trump. Because he's saying that they made false statements about him colluding with Russia when there's evidence that they at least coordinated with each other, like I said, to get information on Hillary Clinton, to spread false information and that sort of thing. And then his own cronies went to jail because they lied about those connections with Russia. So, yeah, now we have people going to jail or getting indicted for these kinds of things, whereas Trump should be the one in jail who got indicted 4 times, and then basically everything went out the window because he's given special treatment and then he became president. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Obama getting charged, like some other people like that. I just don't think they fucking care at this point. What do you guys think?
Well, thanks for providing that insight, because I knew bits and pieces, but not the whole set thing. So, so we know that Trump has weaponized the DOJ to prosecute his political opponents just as part of his fascist agenda. And I haven't looked into the details, but I'm assuming he's just going after Comey because Comey kind of went after him. And I think it's crazy. I mean, it comes down to how much power and money you have, but the fact that this Russia probe case went to trial, went through the court and everything, and they case closed. They ended it and said, there's enough evidence to say that you guys interfered, that Russia interfered with the election, that you had relations and all that. And then the fact that they're able to come back and just say this trial was a fraud and just kind of prosecute everyone who participated in that trial, I think that's so wrong.
Yeah, and pardon everyone who possibly did something for you that got in trouble, just like with the January 6th insurrection. So you just pardon every single one of them. Freaking crazy.
It's worth to note that you can just, if you have the money and the power, you can open these investigations, these BS charges, completely false, not true. I don't even know how he got indicted. I don't know how he got to that point. But
James Comey?
Yeah.
They just said that he lied, in his testimony, which is questionable. I don't think that he did actually lie. He just said things they didn't like.
Yeah.
So then they accuse him of lying.
Mm-hmm. But the fact that, some of these things could not even be true, and, even if it doesn't come down, in the end, it doesn't put Comey in prison, even if the whole trial just kind of fizzles away, he still is wrapped up in legal fees, and it hurts his reputation, and it really doesn't matter to the Trump administration whether things actually follow through with that. They get the outcome they want. It's more about the process of just harming your political opponent's reputation financially, everything.
Yeah, just like how Trump feels like they did to him, even though what they did to him was based on evidence and facts and that sort of thing. Now he's like, oh, I have to go after them. It's crazy how we don't talk about it as much because it literally all just went away. But those charges should have been the end of Trump. Especially, I think one of the most horrifying charges he got, or the indictments, was the classified documents case, and that got completely just dismissed because the judge, what was her name? I forget the judge's name. But yeah, she just disregarded the whole thing when there was evidence that he had hundreds of documents, strewn about, often mixed up with personal items. He had some in his bathroom. He had them move around the boxes to ensure that the feds wouldn't find out. He lied to the government for over a year about not having the documents when they went to him, when the National Archives were like, where are these? So then they finally raid him. And they're like, oh no, he raided me. And then, what was the other one? Literally calling the Secretary of State of Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, demanding 11,780 votes in the 2020 election to literally just thwart democracy. Could you imagine if Obama did that? If he narrowly lost, then he was like, oh, I need 11,000 votes. It's like, bro, the Republicans' heads would explode. You got the New York fraud case, the federal election interference case, and I think that's it. But, and yeah, that's just crazy. That should have been the end to him, but because he was given such preferential treatment, he wasn't locked up. He should have been locked up, pending his trial, I think. And we even see, in Brazil as well as South Korea, how they have former presidents who crashed out. They, I think the South Korean one tried to enact martial law. Bolsonaro from Brazil, he tried to rig the election just like Trump did, and now he's going to jail, or he's in jail right now. And then, and a similar thing goes for the South Korean president. So it's crazy how, they're dealing with their corrupt former leaders, whereas we re-elected our former leader to do more of that. Absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Trump, not being qualified for the presidency, that could be another whole 2-hour discussion. I mean, there's so many things that should prevent him from running, that should put him behind bars now. But yeah, I mean, it all comes down to who you know, and blackmail and bribing and all these things. You just can't get anything done with him, and especially when it came down to close to the election. Well, now you're interfering with the presidency, and then all of that just goes away. But yeah,
it's just excuses, but I'm not really surprised that he's doing all this since he is a billionaire. which we know a lot of billionaires are corrupt. I don't think the only one that I can maybe excuse ever so slightly is Bill Gates, just because once he tried to create a safe nuclear power plant, but then that was blocked by Trump, ironically. So,
Did you see that he showed up in the Epstein files in a recent leak?
Yeah, I did.
Who did?
Yeah, Bill Gates.
Oh, wow.
Which, obviously not everyone in the files is, did that stuff, but
I'm not surprised that he's in the files. It was an island where the billionaires went.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see, like, they need to just release the full Epstein files. You see how Mike Johnson is delaying the certification of an Arizona Democrat who just won her election, because if he certifies it, they'll have enough votes to force the release of the Epstein files. Like, it's crazy because it has bipartisan support. Thomas Massey, who, where is he from? I forget, but he's been a thorn in Trump's side for a while, and his constituents like it. So he's one of the few Republicans. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he voted for like the big beautiful bill and cuts to Medicaid and all that kind of shit. But at least he's willing to, go for the Epstein files. I mean, that's amazing. But yeah, I've got nothing else on that. I'm kind of curious, what does or should being a Democrat mean to you personally? And I say this because it seems like a lot of the time people will talk trash on Democrats, or they'll be like, oh yeah, the Democratic Party, they're not doing this, or the Democrats have lost, touch, or whatever, that sort of thing. And what always kind of irks me is I feel like there's not enough ambition and people think about what the Democratic Party could be. Because when they're saying, oh, yeah, the Democratic Party, they just roll over to the Republicans and they don't actually fight for us. And they're too for capitalism and that sort of thing. And it's like, yeah, you might look at some of the leaders and say that, but who elected those leaders? The people in the Democratic primary put them up, and then they won in the general election. It's up to us to elect Democrats that are actually looking out for our best interest in the primary to then elect them in the general. If they're not, if it's not your current, favorite party and that sort of thing, that's your imperative to change it. That's like how we see with Bernie Sanders running as a Democrat in the Democratic primary. Yeah, he typically runs as an independent in the Senate, but that's a little bit different. Look at AOC, look at Zoran Mamdani, who's a Democratic socialist, who's the official Democratic candidate. And yeah, Hakeem Jeffries and I think Chuck Schumer, they still haven't endorsed him. And that's just more sign that's the old guard of the Democratic Party that needs to be rooted out. And that's not to say that if Hakeem Jeffries becomes House Speaker, next year, that is, that he'll necessarily do a terrible job. I just think that there's not this veracity that should be. And I think that people who are criticizing the Democrats, they paint it with way too broad of a brush, and they need to think more, oh, well, how can I infiltrate and make the Democratic Party better? Because unfortunately, you really have no other option. You could try third party. But unfortunately, it seems like a lot of like the Democrat haters, they don't even want to go to a third party. They don't want to vote at all. They just think, oh, well, the whole system needs to be overhauled. Okay, how are you going to overhaul it? A complete revolution? Or are we going to get completely fucking destroyed by Trump and the military and that sort of thing? It's like you need political change is at least, a huge part of it. And I just wish that people would stop painting it with as broad of a brush and seeing one thing a Democrat does and saying, oh, all Democrats are bad and I'm not a Democrat and I'll never identify. What do you guys think?
So the system that we're currently in, it's been around for what? Since the birth of the country, like 200 years?
There's been other political parties, but it's almost always whittled down to like two.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, like even our current one, just this like kind of current Republican versus Democrat, kind of the current stuff, you can easily trace back to the 80s. It's been like, 40, almost 50 years of that. It's kind of baked into our system, our society. So I feel like, I'm speaking from more towards like the super left-leaning people, because I got a lot of friends who are like, oh, the Democrats aren't doing enough, so I'm going to vote third party or start my own party, just to make sure, we can get in. But you got to play the game that you're stuck in, it's just, I don't really think capitalism is the greatest system, but it's what we have right now. So might as well, learn to play it and play it to benefit everyone else. So I just feel like, being a Democrat, like a good one, especially for like our age group, is just, take your probably more liberal and left ideas, and try to, force your way through, like the new mayor of New York did. All that stuff, just, you got to play the game if you're going to want to change anything.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of the time, and I find this just as the WSU Dems president, it's like I'm pretty left on many issues, and the only reason why I'm in this position as the president of the WSU Dems is because I made an effort to become that and to work and to show up. I swear, if all the people who are complaining about the Democratic Party, and honestly sometimes rightfully so, but if they spent that amount of time volunteering and showing up to their county Democratic, committee meetings, or got involved in local politics in general or stuff like that, it's like they would find a home, and if they're willing to put in the work, they would get to a position of influence just by showing up in the Democratic Party, and they would accept you just as much. I say that as someone who does have some niche views, like on animal rights, like I'm vegan and that sort of thing. I have some niche views that a lot of Democrats and just a lot of people in general disagree with, but I still show up, and I still associate with the good parts of the Democratic Party, and I try to make it better and build my own brand, and that's why I love what Zoran Mamdani did. And I'm curious to hear what people who would always say that, I'm curious to hear what they think now that he has won that primary, or he won it several weeks ago, but if they would still be like, oh yeah, the Democratic Party, because he's also pro-Palestine and all that sort of thing, which is another reason all those leftists are like, oh, I hate Democrats and that sort of thing. So
I think it takes zero research and zero intelligence to be able to criticize. So, people go around saying, criticizing this and that, and they don't have a better idea for what should be done. But they don't really care to do their research. They're just here to say, this sucks, and I don't like this person, and that's it. So I think it's really important to get involved, like you said, and try and make a difference. Some people aren't very interested in politics, and there's that just is kind of how it is, and not everyone finds it interesting. That's fine, but it definitely applies to everyone's life at some point in a lot of different ways, and I think everyone should get involved a little bit, do their own research, form their own opinions, and not just regurgitate what others say online, and all they do is criticize, try and come up with some solutions.
Do you think politics is more about compromise or conviction? Do you think we should compromise with the Republicans more, or do you think we should be more so we're for our own party and that sort of thing? Although I'm curious how that would work, because you need some kind of compromise. That's kind of like a classic question, like how much compromise is justified to do. So yeah, I'm kind of curious. I don't know.
I mean, I overall think compromise is the better thing, but with how the current state of, the GOP and a lot of Republicans are, I don't think, it's worth it to compromise with them, because a lot of them are like, a lot of them are like theo-fascists, They think we're a Christian nation when, literally even your 5th grade U.S. history class has taught you that we are, separation of church and state, and it's not supposed to be, the 10 Commandments in every classroom like in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And, once we get to a point where, let's separate church and state, then we can start compromising, because, I don't know, if you live in Oklahoma and everyone within a 80-mile radius is your branch of Christianity, if your whole county is evangelical, okay, make your county laws and rules like that, because everyone agrees the same. But when it comes to like this whole federal thing where it's like, nope, we're a Christian nation, we're not. Like there's a good chunk of like even like Hindu and Buddhist. Like I think there's a Hindu temple just like there's one in Utah. So it's like Utah is a Mormon state, but there's temples for plenty of other religions in Utah. So, we got to, once we can, in my opinion, once we actually separate church and state, I think that's when compromises are more valid. But until then, we just kind of gotta, each man for themselves.
That's a good point. Because with religion and that sort of thing, that can make it so they're not down to compromise, or that can definitely skew their views on abortion and many things like that. So yeah, I completely agree.
I think the Trump administration has kind of brought religion and Christianity into the Oval Office more than previous presidents. I think the way, especially with Carolyn Leavitt, just the way they record videos publicly of her praying, the way that she prays, it doesn't seem right at all. And personally, I'm not religious, but I'd like to believe that, that Christianity and Jesus was mainly, to help people. It's in the Bible. He's with, prostitutes and disabled people. And nowadays people are just weaponizing Christianity to just attack others and suppress others. And I think absolutely it should be separated from state, but also I think it needs to be looked at as more of a way to uplift and help people rather than criticize and hate on people.
Yeah. And with the separation of church and state, I would like to also that should also mean not telling everyone to pray for rain like Governor Cox did during our crazy drought, and he thinks that's actually going to do anything.
Did he do that? When was that?
This was a while back. I think this might have even been like 2022, 2023, something like that, where he literally told us to pray for rain because we weren't getting enough of it. And it's just like, dude, how about you do your job? And that's partly why I called in, because like I was talking to Stella before about this. I called in to he was on a radio show, and I called in, and it was kind of about animal rights. And I was talking partly about how, like, with animal agriculture and that sort of thing, how beef production takes up so much more water than like producing vegetables and that sort of thing. And when I kind of said that to him, he was like, oh, well, we support our beef farmers. We support if you want to live like an alternative lifestyle and that sort of thing. But it's like, didn't even address what I was trying to say, that this is why, or this is a big part of why we are lacking water. So instead of looking to actual solutions, like, for example, the alfalfa farmers, who I believe they grow a lot of stuff for livestock as well. So it kind of goes into it. Or, these huge, what are they called? The not golf courts, the
Golf courses?
Yeah, golf courses. Like how you have all these huge golf courses taking up so much water. Mm-hmm. Like there's so much stuff that we're wasting water on that needs to be addressed that he's just not willing to address, which is unfortunate. We need to wait until, he's out of there and we can elect a Democrat or a left-leaning independent.
I think Cox could stay in power if he, would stop being a coward. And specifically on the water stuff, I'm from Utah County, which is like almost as far right and religious as you can get. And a lot of people down there agree with, they choose to water less and whatnot, which I find interesting because, there's all these golf courses, right? Fun fact, you can have some golf courses just in areas where it's kind of like natural for that kind of grass to grow. To my knowledge, Fox Hollow and American Fork, they don't run their sprinklers as frequently as other golf courses in Utah County because it's just kind of in this weird little kind of cove and like oasis where it's just kind of naturally damp. Mm. And then my grandma has a field across from her house that grows a shit ton of alfalfa, and she does not touch it. Just the rainfall is enough to grow that alfalfa. So all these people like watering these giant alfalfa fields either need to research better places to put the alfalfa, or it just doesn't need that much water from just these little things I've noticed across just, my everyday experiences.
Good point. So yeah, there's been anything wrong with the governor, like how he vetoed a bill. I think he vetoed a bill about they say men and girls sports, which only targeted like 3 trans people in school. He vetoed that. That got overridden. And then he didn't veto another anti-trans bill, which literally banned gender affirming care for minors, I believe it was, which and that might sound okay at first, like, oh well, why do you want to genitally mutilate minors or scar them for life and that sort of thing? It's like gender affirming care has been proven to be the most effective treatment for gender dysphoria, which is the discomfort you feel with your gender that you identify as being separate from the gender you were given at birth, basically. So yeah, he vetoed the sports one, but then not the way more extreme one that actually goes against what the scientific community says can prevent suicide. So it was just completely performative to start with. And then he's just, oh no, we're for MAGA and that sort of thing. He endorsed Trump after originally saying he wasn't going to. Like, He just has absolutely no spine, and he knew that he would face a stronger primary like he did from Phil Lyman. He knew that he would face it much stronger if he wouldn't kowtow to MAGA and act like he is MAGA. So that's why he is the way he is now, completely sold out his soul. And that's the one thing that we could never say, because if you're a Democrat in Utah, you haven't sold out your soul, because it is not easy for us out here. So to say you're a Democrat really shows that, you know, you're actually standing up for what you believe in. You're not just an opportunist like someone like Cox. You know, any of us could just say, oh yeah, I'm a Republican, and run and literally just say what you need to get through the primary and get power that way. We're not doing that because we're Democrats and we support human rights and everything like that. So yeah.
Is he up for re-election in the midterms?
No, he was up for re-election in 2020 and then 2024, so he's term limited after this. So there'll be a whole new race, which is good for us because we're more likely to win an open seat rather than an incumbent. Which, although, yeah, and I'm wearing my King for Governor shirt because he's now the chair of the Utah Democratic Party, so still kind of applicable. He's awesome. We did a whole town hall with him and everything. Hope everyone watching has a nice day or night, and make sure to tune in for the next one. See you, everybody.